Hi everyone, welcome back to Lightsabers. Today's video is one that I've been planning for quite some time, so I'm really excited that I got a chance to sit down and record it. As you can probably tell from the video title and thumbnail, today's video is going to be a comparison between the Obi-Wan Episode 3 and Episode 4 lightsabers. We're going to discuss what makes these two lightsabers different, even though they're supposed to be the same. So a little bit of overview before we get started. The Episode 3 Obi-Wan saber is based on the prop that Ewan McGregor used in Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith, and the Episode 4 Obi-Wan lightsaber is based on the prop that Alec Guinness used during the filming of Star Wars A New Hope. So both of these lightsabers are supposed to be the same, of course. At the end of Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan still has the lightsaber in his possession when he goes into his exile on Tatooine, and when we see him in Episode 4, A New Hope, he has that same lightsaber. It is, of course, supposed to be the same. It is a bit different, and for those of you who have watched the Kenobi series, you probably remember that they actually took the Episode 3 lightsaber as the base, and they added the emitter of the Episode 4 lightsaber to it to create sort of a marriage of the two props. So without too much further explanation, I'm going to go ahead and switch to the desk cam, and we're going to go over some of the details, some of the fine points piece by piece. That way you can get a pretty good view of the different props and get an idea of what makes them different. All right, so you've got a pretty good view of the two props here. I want to point out that both of these props are from Ultimate Works, or the POC store. The POC store sells the Ultimate Works hilts. You can also buy them direct from Ultimate Works. This is their OWR, or OB3, and then this is the OB4. Both of these are of a very similar weight, so the build quality of both of them is good, but we're not really here to talk about the specific details of these particular models. We're really more here to talk about the details of the props themselves. But I just wanted to point out that while these are both really good replicas of these props, there are other versions of the props out there that might be more accurate. The Obi-Wan Episode 3 lightsaber, the Anakin Starkiller General McGregor, as well as the SP Saber's High Ground are considered to be some of the best out there. And for the Obi-Wan Episode 4, the Roman Props Mark I is considered to be probably the most accurate that there is. So we're going to go ahead and start at the top and make our way down. So that means starting with the emitters. I'm just going to start at the very top of the emitter. You can see here that the emitter on this hilt is very similar to the emitter on this hilt, but the blade plugs are going to be the primary difference. You've got holes on both of them at the top, right? But the holes on this one actually show through based on the real world prop, whereas this one is simply an idealization of that feature. Notice that the blade plug on this one actually does stick out a little bit. That's really similar to the 89 Sabers prop. And on this one, you actually have, it's sort of flush and actually even a little bit conical facing inwards. Other than that, you've got different shapes of your emitters. So I'm going to go ahead and set these back down now that we've seen the top, and we're going to go through them that way. So notice that the shape of the emitters is different. You can tell definitely that this one is based on this one. You've got a lot of the same details, right? You've got a thin upper lip here, just like you have on this one, and then you've got a stair step down into a second part that's not quite the main emitter yet, but it's a little bit wider, and then you've got another stair step down into the main section of the emitter, which is still fairly thin, and then you've got one more stair step down here, right? So there, you can tell that this, when it was machined for Episode 3, they were definitely referencing the original prop, but of course it's not a cast of the original prop, it's not a copy, it's just an idealized version for the prequels. But you can see definitely there's a big difference in the type of finish as well. So this is a brushed aluminum finish, which is accurate to the Master Replicas prop, and a lot of the Revenge of the Sith props, I believe, that were screen used did also have the brushed aluminum finish. This one is more of it's steel. It's not aluminum, it's steel, it's blackened steel, and this is what the prop looked like in filming. Moving down a little bit, you can see that once again, you've got, the form here is inspired by this one. So you've got an upper neck portion above the wind vane. You've got a line that goes through the middle of it. So they're both consistent there, but of course this one's black. It's also made of brass. This one is made of brass, whereas this one, this looks like it's copper. This may not be copper. This may be an anodized aluminum or some other alloy, but for purposes of the prop, this is copper colored. This is brass that's coated in like a black weathering. Further down, you've got a wind vane. Now this is actually the real wind vane that we talk about. This here is an idealized version of that was created for the episode 3 prop to give it that same kind of look. Of course, it's very different, right? It's more of an elegant look. It juts out here at the top, and then it actually has a big divot here where it goes in and then it flares out. So it goes in and flares out. This one doesn't really do that. It does have a bit of a stair step or a flare at the bottom, but this one is much more pronounced. You can tell it's very idealized. Moving down, you've got, once again, this is really mimicking this one. Now, this portion on the neck of the Obi-Wan episode 3 lightsaber is much longer than the same portion on the episode 4 lightsaber, but it has the same basic silhouette or basic shape anyway. So you go from the wind vane and you've got a stair step down into this longer, thinner part. This one does the same thing, but of course, this one actually has a much, and this one is actually a straight stair step down, whereas this one is at an angle here. This step is not 90 degrees, it's more of a 45-degree step. And if you look at them side by side, I'm going to try to line them up the best I can. I think they actually already are. The neck starts here, and the neck on the Obi-Wan episode 4 ends here, about halfway down the lower section of the Obi-Wan episode 3. So the neck portion is much longer on the Obi-Wan episode 3 by maybe 20% or so, maybe a little more. To compensate for that, of course, the Obi-Wan episode 3 has a shorter grip section. So you can see side by side, this grip section starts higher up, and then they both end here, roughly above what we'll call the clamp section. Of course, on the Obi-Wan episode 4, that is a real Graflex clamp. On the Obi-Wan episode 3, it's not, but we'll get there in a moment. The grip section on the Obi-Wan episode 3 is once again based on the Obi-Wan episode 4. So you've got your upper lip here of the grenade grip section, and we call it that because on the original prop that was made using found parts, it was an old British rifle grenade that was used for this grip section. So you've got this sort of lip here at the top, and then below the upper lip, you have the V-cuts that go all the way down. But you'll notice on both of these, the upper section does not have that V-cut going down, the vertical cut. That starts on the very next lip. So you'll see it starts here and goes all the way down here to the piece right above the clamp. And on this piece, it does the same thing. The only difference that I would note is that there's actually one more divot here in this grip before you get to the clamp. Here, it's a solid flat piece that goes directly into the clamp. And that would be the case because these pieces were machined to fit together for the Obi-Wan episode 3 prop, whereas for this prop, they were sort of putting together things that were found parts that were not originally meant to go together. And so you'll get things like this where the edges are not straight or flat edges. Moving down a bit more, we've got the clamp section. The Obi-Wan episode 3 has an additional silver extension here below the grip, and then a stair step up to the clamp. You can probably see there's a line there. I'll see if I can move it and show that. You can see that line there, and that stair step up is sort of what is taking up space for the extra divot at the bottom of the grip there. So you can see there's extra space there before the clamp, and like I mentioned, the episode 3 saber doesn't have that, and so it kind of does this instead. The clamp itself has a brass clamp card on the Obi-Wan episode 3, whereas the Obi-Wan Episode 4 has the classic A New Hope bubble strip that we see both on this lightsaber and on Luke's lightsaber in A New Hope. Of course, this clamp here is really just smooth all the way around. It's completely idealized version. It's a completely idealized version of this one. You don't have any kind of Graflex stamping or anything like that. You do have some greeblies on the side, copper upper greebly and a bit of a gear looking lower greebly. On some Obi-Wan Episode 3 hilts, those greeblies are actually the buttons. On this particular version, the buttons are under the clamp card. For the Obi-Wan Episode 4, you will notice the clamp, of course, you've got the bubble strip, and then you've got a Graflex clamp. It does have the Graflex stamping on it, like the original prop would have. You've got the lines in the clamp, and then you've, of course, got the clamp lever. And where the greeblies are on the Episode 3, you guessed it, there are greeblies here. So the Episode 3 greeblies were more of an idealized prequel-looking interpretation of what are generally considered to be these transistors that were used as greeblies on the actual prop. But you can see with the placement of them that they are definitely meant to be the same pieces, those greeblies there. They're just different in their interpretation. Moving down a bit lower, once again, we do have the same section here. This is the booster section. It's a gear-looking part that goes around, wraps around the hilt underneath the clamp. On the Obi-Wan Episode 3, it has a CoverTech wheel right here. The CoverTech is absent on the Obi-Wan Episode 4 because instead the prequel props made use of D-rings, so we've got a D-ring here. Of course, the Episode 3 is missing the D-ring. The booster sections themselves are different, of course. The gear on the Episode 4 is a much sharper gear with much deeper divots in between the rises. The Episode 3 gear section is once again a much more idealized version of that. So it's much more rounded, the grooves are much more shallow, it's more comfortable to hold. All in all, you can tell the sort of theme of this hilt, which is having an idealized, more comfortable or aesthetic version of this hilt, is continued in the booster as well. When you get to the pommel, we see that continue even more still. The pommel on this hilt is longer. You can see that there is a longer silver section here, and that is to make up for what you've got here, which is this gap between the booster and the pommel section. And once again, that's just because that's how they could fit the parts together when they were putting together these hilts out of found parts. You just end up with gaps and things like the one here and the one here, little idiosyncrasies that when they were machining these props, they took out or they modified them to make them look more uniform. So you've got a longer silver section here. You do still have a bit of a gap here, but it's very small compared to what you've got here. Then once you go up a little further on this pommel, you have a little bit of a stair step up, and you've got the same thing on here. So this is clearly mimicking this once again. The pommel cubes themselves are very similarly shaped, but they're certainly not the same. Of course, you've got a D-ring here that's missing here. Even the orientation of the pommel cubes is not the same. I can't really speak to what the accurate on-screen reference would be, but this is just for the pommel cubes for the Ultimate Works hilts. But I would imagine that they're fairly accurate for the clocking of the cubes. Moving down, we've got a stair step down off of the pommel cube section. This hilt actually has the opposite. It goes down off of the pommel section and then it has a stair step up to the pommel cap. Now, the original part for the pommel for the Obi-Wan Episode 4 hilt was a sync knob. Armitage Shanks was the company that made them, and they were just like sync knobs that you would turn. So that's what this is not made from. This is a replica, of course, but that's what it's based on, whereas this was an idealized version of that. Of course, these two hilts are in canon the same hilt from top to bottom. The in-universe explanation is probably, whatever you want to make up in your own head. But, this is a dirtier version of this, a grimier version, maybe Obi-Wan had to replace some parts, and over, the 20 or so years between the two films, the nice, clean, shiny prop, the hilt had some issues or whatever, had to be replaced with pieces that maybe weren't quite so nice or aesthetic looking, because when you're a Jedi hiding in the desert from an Empire, you don't really get your first pick of parts that you want. And like I mentioned earlier, in the Obi-Wan TV series, the prop team actually took the emitter from this hilt and just stuck it right on the top of this hilt. And then they weathered it. So there's a bit of sanding on the grip here, a bit of sanding down here, a bit of rough spots and dents throughout. But primarily, the Obi-Wan series hilt is the Episode 3 hilt, just with the Episode 4 emitter. So those are most of the differences between the Obi-Wan Episode 3 hilt and the Obi-Wan Episode 4 hilt. I wanted to make this video just because a lot of times I'll see people saying that this was the lightsaber hilt that Obi-Wan was using in Episode 4, or that this was the lightsaber hilt that Obi-Wan was using in Episode 3. And as you can see, neither of those statements would be true just because these hilts are so different. Whether it's the different diameter of the hilt itself, whereas this hilt is much thicker all the way around and this hilt is much slimmer, or it's the different dimensions of the neck. This neck is much longer than this neck. This grip section is much shorter than this neck. Of course, you've got other dimensional and material changes throughout the different hilts. Whether it's any of those things, it's very clear that the hilts themselves are very different. So while this is the Episode 3 hilt, it is not the Episode 4 hilt, and the same goes for this hilt as well. This is the Episode 4 hilt, but not the Episode 3 hilt. And I just think it's very curious how this in-universe could end up like this, right? And there's no plausible way, really, for it to just grow in outer diameter size, but if you sort of ignore that, you could sort of think that perhaps over time, Obi-Wan had to change out certain parts, right? Maybe the greeblies got changed out for aluminum parts, and maybe the neck section got a little darkened with age, maybe had to be replaced. Maybe the cover tech fell off and a D-ring was put in place. The clamp card maybe was changed out, and of course the chrome would have dulled over time, maybe blackened a bit toward the top. And you could chalk that up to the fact that he was in exile in the desert, and when you're in exile, hiding from the Empire, living on your own as a Jedi, you don't really have access to the best parts. We saw in the Kenobi series, Obi-Wan was trading with Jawas to get even older, more broken down pieces of things. So that's really what I wanted to go over today, is just talk about the differences between the two props, how one corresponds to the other, and how some of those machining choices might have been made, as well as just talking about how one prop, while it might correspond to the other one, certainly is not the same. Thanks again for tuning into the video today. As I mentioned at the beginning, this was one that I've been planning to record for quite some time, so I'm really glad that I got a chance to do it. As always, thanks for tuning into the channel. Please give the video a like and comment if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you like the content, and I'll see you in the next video.